He choked me because I wouldn't lend him money. My stepfather's hands wrapped around my neck as though my breath didn't matter, as though my existence was nothing more than a barrier between him and what he wanted. The memory of that moment is etched into me, not only because of the violence itself but because of what followed. My mother didn't rush to protect me. She didn't scream for him to stop. Instead, she told me later that I had provoked him. That word, provoked, still stings more than his grip ever did. When people talk about home, they often describe warmth, laughter, and comfort. For me, home was a place of fear. It was where footsteps in the hallway meant holding my breath, where the sound of a door slamming made me flinch so hard my muscles ached afterward. It was where survival meant staying quiet, staying small, and never expecting protection from the person who gave me life. My stepfather was not the kind of man who needed an excuse to lash out. Money was only one of the many triggers. If dinner wasn't ready the way he liked it, if a shirt wasn't ironed right, if he thought someone looked at him wrong, the storm would come. His anger was sharp and unpredictable, a weapon he wielded against anyone weaker than him. Most often, that was me. And my mother, she was supposed to be my shield. She was supposed to be the one person who would look at me and say, "You don't deserve this." Instead, she became his defender. She always had a reason for his violence. He was stressed. He was tired. He was drunk. Or worse, she said it was me. That I was difficult, disrespectful, provoking him. Those words carved into me slowly, until I began to wonder if she was right. I remember being 14 when I first realized I was completely on my own, even though I wasn't living alone. That night, he had screamed at me for leaving my shoes near the door. Just shoes. He shoved me so hard I hit the wall, the breath knocked out of me. I looked up, dazed, waiting for my mother to say something, to tell him he'd gone too far. She didn't. She picked up the shoes and moved them aside as though that had been the problem all along. She didn't look at me. She didn't check if I was okay. She just smoothed things over for him, leaving me on the floor. It was then that I began to split into two versions of myself. There was the girl who lived in that house, careful, quiet, constantly bracing for the next blow. And then there was the girl I pretended to be outside, the one who smiled at teachers and laughed with classmates, the one who never let anyone see the truth. I learned early that silence was survival. If I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they'd tell her, and she'd twist the story until it became my fault again. The choking incident wasn't the first time he put his hands on me, but it was one of the scariest. I had told him no, that simple word that children should be allowed to say, that teenagers should be able to stand on. He wanted money I had been saving from babysitting jobs, a few crumpled bills and coins I kept hidden in a jar. I wanted to save for college, for some kind of escape. He demanded it, and when I refused, his face darkened. Before I knew it, I was against the wall, his hands squeezing, my lungs burning. The world went blurry at the edges. I thought I was going to die in that moment. Not in some dramatic, exaggerated way, but truly. My vision was narrowing, my body thrashing without air, and my brain screaming for oxygen. I remember clawing at his arms, the raw panic flooding me, the primal instinct to survive. Then suddenly, he let go. I collapsed, gasping, my throat burning, tears streaming down my face. My mother didn't cradle me. She didn't scream at him. She didn't call the police. She looked at me with cold eyes and said I shouldn't have provoked him. That I should have just given him the money. Her words twisted the knife deeper. Because it wasn't only him hurting me, it was her betrayal that truly broke me. After that, something inside me shifted. I stopped hoping she would protect me. I stopped expecting rescue. Instead, I started focusing on endurance. I measured days not by what happened but by what I survived. Every bruise became another reminder that I was still breathing, still standing, no matter how much they wanted to crush me. School became my only refuge, though even there I carried the weight of my secrets. I would sit in classrooms, my throat still sore from his hands, and pretend to take notes while my mind replayed the scene again and again. Sometimes I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth to anyone who would listen. But then I'd hear her voice in my head, that cutting dismissal, attention seeker, dramatic, provoking him. And I stayed quiet. Friends invited me to their houses, and those visits were like glimpses into another world. A world where mothers hugged their kids, where fathers worked hard but laughed at the dinner table, where disagreements didn't end in bruises. I would smile and pretend I was fine, but deep down, I was aching. Because I knew when I went home, I was stepping back into a cage. The worst part wasn't always the violence itself, it was the aftermath. The way my mother would act like nothing happened. She'd set dinner on the table, ask about my day, and carry on as though her husband hadn't just choked the breath out of me. And if I dared to look broken, if I dared to show the pain, she would snap that I was being dramatic. Her indifference crushed me in ways no physical hit ever could. I started writing in secret. Journals filled with messy handwriting and tear stains, where I poured out everything I couldn't say aloud. In those pages, I was honest. I admitted I hated him. I admitted I felt abandoned by her. I admitted I wanted out more than anything. Writing became my only way of screaming into the void, of making sure my truth existed somewhere, even if no one else ever saw it. But journals didn't save me from the nights when fear kept me awake. I would lie in bed, listening for his footsteps, praying he wouldn't come into my room. My body lived in a constant state of alert, muscles tight, heart pounding, ready for the worst. Sleep was shallow, food often sat untouched in my stomach, and my grades began to slip despite how hard I tried. Teachers noticed but assumed it was just teenage laziness. No one looked closer. The choking left more than just a memory. For weeks afterward, I couldn't swallow without pain. I wore scarves even when the weather was warm, terrified someone would see the marks on my neck. I learned how to smile with my mouth but not my eyes, how to make excuses for everything, how to bury the truth deeper than anyone could reach. My mother kept telling me I was provoking him, that I should know better, that if I just kept the peace, things would be fine. But nothing was ever fine. Peace was impossible in a house built on rage and denial. Her words only convinced me further that I was invisible to her except as a problem to be managed. As I grew older, my survival strategy shifted again. I stopped fighting back. I stopped saying no. I gave him money when he asked, not because I wanted to but because I wanted to avoid another set of bruises. I let her words wash over me like poison I had no choice but to drink. It was easier to fold into silence than to risk choking again. Still, there were sparks of resistance deep inside me. They were small, fragile, and often buried under fear, but they existed. When I studied late into the night, when I saved coins in a different hiding place, when I dared to imagine a life outside those walls, those sparks grew. They reminded me that somewhere beneath the scars, I still wanted more than just survival. I wanted freedom. Teenage years were supposed to be about discovery, freedom, and beginnings. For me, they were about learning how to disappear. I mastered the art of silence, of making myself small, of anticipating moods before they erupted. My life revolved around keeping him calm and keeping her from blaming me for his storms. But no matter how careful I was, it was never enough. There was always something wrong with me in their eyes. Too loud. Too quiet. Too messy. Too defiant. Too withdrawn. He could twist anything into an excuse, and she would nod in agreement, her loyalty to him outweighing any flicker of love for me. The message was clear, I was the problem, and if I suffered, I deserved it. At school, I clung to normalcy. I laughed at jokes, joined group projects, and pretended I wasn't counting the hours until I had to go home. Teachers praised me for my work ethic, friends thought I was reliable, and no one suspected that behind the mask was a girl who spent nights hiding money in books and shoes because her stepfather kept taking whatever he found. The same jar I had once saved in was gone, stolen from me after the choking incident. But I started again, this time more careful, spreading the savings into different corners of my room where he wouldn't think to look. Each coin I tucked away felt like rebellion, like a small declaration that I wouldn't always belong to him or her. I didn't know exactly what I was saving for college, a bus ticket, maybe just a chance at leaving, but I knew I had to keep trying. That quiet act of defiance gave me something to hold on to when everything else was suffocating. Still, there were nights I almost gave up. Nights when his anger raged out of nowhere, when he'd slam me against a wall or yank me by the arm so hard I thought it might break. My mother would watch with her lips pressed tight, sometimes muttering that I should stop provoking him, sometimes not saying anything at all. The silence in those moments was louder than any shout. It told me she had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. One night in particular is burned into me. I was 16. He had been drinking heavily, stumbling through the house with the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a second skin. I tried to stay invisible, retreating to my room, but he found me. He accused me of stealing from him, though I hadn't touched a single one of his things. He cornered me, yelling so close to my face that spit hit my skin. My heart pounded, my hands trembled, and I felt that familiar dread. If I said the wrong thing, if I looked at him wrong, it could turn violent in an instant. When I denied his accusation, he shoved me hard enough that I hit my desk. My hip throbbed, tears sprang to my eyes, and I bit my lip to keep from crying out. Crying only made it worse. He raged for a few more minutes before storming off, leaving me shaking in the dark. Later, my mother came into my room. For a split second, I thought she might comfort me, might finally acknowledge my pain. Instead, she sighed and told me I needed to stop making him so angry, that I was pushing his buttons, that I should learn when to keep my mouth shut. Then she left. No hug. No kindness. Nothing. Her words cut deeper than his shove. Because in that moment, I realized she didn't just fail to protect me, she blamed me. She saw his violence as a reaction, not a choice. She saw me as the cause, not the victim. And if my own mother couldn't see the truth, who else ever would? That realization silenced me even more. I stopped trying to speak up about what was happening at home. I stopped hoping someone would notice. I carried my pain like a secret disease, invisible to the world but eating me alive inside. Yet even in the middle of that darkness, small sparks of hope kept me going. A teacher who encouraged me when I doubted myself. A friend who slipped me an extra sandwich when I forgot lunch. A neighbor who smiled kindly at me every morning. These little gestures might have seemed small to others, but to me, they were lifelines. Proof that not everyone in the world was cruel or blind. Proof that kindness existed outside those suffocating walls. I threw myself into schoolwork, telling myself that if I could just graduate with good grades, I could leave. College became less of a dream and more of a necessity. It wasn't about wanting an education, it was about wanting freedom. I knew that without it, I might never escape. Still, the abuse left scars I couldn't hide. Sometimes I'd flinch when someone raised their voice, even in laughter. Sometimes I'd shrink away when a classmate brushed past me in the hallway. People noticed my odd reactions, but no one connected the dots. They just assumed I was shy, sensitive, maybe a little awkward. They didn't see that I was carrying the weight of survival on my shoulders. By 17, I was exhausted. Years of bracing for impact, of silencing my cries, of pretending everything was fine had worn me down. There were moments I wondered if life would ever be different, if I was doomed to this cycle forever. But then I'd open my hidden stash of money, count the coins and crumpled bills, and feel a flicker of determination. Every penny meant possibility. Every penny meant I had a chance, no matter how small. And then came another breaking point. He demanded money again. I had hidden most of my savings well, but he found a small amount in my backpack, money I had earned from tutoring. He accused me of holding out on him, his face twisted with rage. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as he grabbed me by the wrist and shook me hard enough that my teeth rattled. I begged him to stop, told him it was all I had, but he wouldn't listen. My mother finally spoke, and what she said was worse than silence. She told him to take it, that I didn't need it anyway. In that moment, my heart broke in a new way. She didn't just ignore my pain, she handed me over to it. She gave him permission to strip away the only thing keeping me hopeful. And she looked at me as though I deserved it. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, my body aching, my chest tight with betrayal. I didn't just lose money, I lost the illusion that my mother might one day love me enough to choose me. I realized then that she never would. Her loyalty to him was stronger than any bond with me. And if I wanted to survive, I had to stop waiting for her to change. That realization lit a fire in me. I still had some money hidden away, and I promised myself I would guard it with everything I had. I would get out, no matter what it took. I didn't know when or how, but I knew staying meant slowly dying inside. From that day forward, I started planning, not just hoping. I researched colleges far from home. I looked up scholarships. I worked extra hours whenever I could. Every step felt dangerous, like I was balancing on a wire above disaster, but it also felt necessary. I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I was preparing. And deep down, beneath the fear and exhaustion, a new thought began to grow: I deserved better. For years, I had believed I was the problem, that I provoked him, that I made her turn away. But maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't me at all. The more I planned my escape, the more careful I had to become. Living under his roof was like living in a minefield: one wrong step, one careless glance, and everything could explode. If he even suspected that I was hiding money or making plans without his approval, I knew he would take it all away. And my mother wouldn't stop him. She never stopped him. So I became skilled at pretending. On the outside, I was obedient, quiet, agreeable. I nodded when he barked orders, apologized even when I hadn't done anything wrong, and laughed at his jokes when they weren't funny. But on the inside, I was plotting. Every smile was a mask. Every apology was a shield. I wasn't trying to make peace anymore, I was biding my time. My stash of money grew slowly. I found ways to earn without him noticing. Babysitting for neighbors. Tutoring classmates who struggled with math. Even small things, like returning bottles for change. Each time I tucked away a few dollars, I felt stronger, like I was building a secret armor around myself. The armor wasn't physical, but it gave me hope. And hope was something he couldn't choke out of me. Still, his control tightened. He began checking my backpack more often, demanding to know where I was going, sometimes even following me when I left the house. I don't know if it was paranoia or just his need for dominance, but it made my life even more suffocating. The walls of that house seemed to close in tighter every day. Then came the night that almost broke me. I had just gotten home from tutoring when he confronted me. He accused me of lying about where I had been, said he didn't believe anyone would actually pay me to teach them. His voice was thick with alcohol, his words sharp and slurred at the same time. My mother stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded, watching like she always did. I tried to stay calm, tried to explain, but he wasn't listening. He never listened. Suddenly, he lunged forward and shoved me against the wall, his hand pressing hard against my throat. The air rushed out of me, panic flooding my body as his grip tightened. My hands clawed at his wrist, my chest heaved, my vision blurred. I thought, this is it. This is how it ends. And then, just as quickly, he let go. I crumpled to the floor, gasping, coughing, my throat burning. My mother's voice filled the room, not with fear, not with anger, but with blame. She said I provoked him again. She said I should stop challenging him, stop making everything worse. As I lay there, barely able to breathe, she made me feel like I was the aggressor. Like I had done this to myself. That night, something inside me shifted permanently. Up until then, I had clung to tiny threads of hope that my mother might eventually see me, hear me, protect me. But watching her stand there, siding with the man who had just tried to choke the life out of me, shattered that illusion for good. She wasn't going to save me. And if I didn't save myself, no one would. That realization became my fuel. I stopped waiting for her approval, her validation, her love. I stopped trying to win her over or explain my side. Instead, I focused all of my energy on survival and escape. I worked harder at school, applied for every scholarship I could find, and researched colleges late into the night when they were asleep. Each application was like a lifeline, a rope I was throwing into the unknown in hopes of pulling myself out. But the toll on my body and mind was heavy. I developed constant anxiety, my chest tightening whenever footsteps approached. I startled at sudden noises, flinched when someone raised their hand too quickly near me. My sleep was broken, filled with nightmares of being trapped, of being choked again, of my mother's cold eyes watching me suffer. I carried all of it alone because talking about it felt dangerous. What if someone told my mother? What if it got back to him? What if I was punished even worse for daring to expose the truth? So I carried it quietly, silently, like I always had. Then one afternoon at school, a teacher pulled me aside. She told me she had noticed how tired I looked, how distracted I seemed lately. She asked if I was okay. The kindness in her eyes almost broke me. For a split second, I wanted to tell her everything, to let the truth spill out of me like poison I couldn't hold anymore. But fear clamped my mouth shut. I smiled instead, told her I was fine, blamed homework and stress. She nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully believe me. Even though I didn't open up, that moment stayed with me. It reminded me that not everyone would look at me the way my mother did. There were people in the world who cared, even if they didn't know the full story. And maybe, just maybe, one day I would find the courage to let someone in. For now, I had to keep my focus on the future. College applications. Scholarships. Savings. I didn't let myself think too far ahead, just the next step, and then the next. That was how I survived, one small goal at a time. Still, the house was relentless. He continued his cycle of rage, sometimes violent, sometimes just cruel. My mother continued her cycle of blame, always pointing the finger at me. Each day felt like a battle, but now I had something I hadn't had before: clarity. I knew who they were. I knew what they would never be. And I knew I deserved better than their twisted version of love. The night I received my first scholarship acceptance letter, I sat alone in my room, tears streaming down my face. Not because I was sad, but because it was proof. Proof that I wasn't worthless. Proof that I had a way out. Proof that my future didn't have to look like my present. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my notebook, and whispered a promise to myself. No matter what it took, I was going to leave. I didn't know how messy or dangerous it would get. I didn't know how hard it would be to break free. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I was not going to spend the rest of my life choking on silence. The day I realized my escape was closer than I had ever dared to dream, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: real, unshakable hope. The scholarship letter wasn't just a piece of paper, it was my lifeline. It was proof that I could leave the house that had caged me, proof that there was a world outside where I wasn't defined by bruises and accusations. But hope came with fear. He noticed every shift in my behavior, every flicker of excitement I tried to hide. He would squint at me, studying my face like he was trying to read the secrets in my mind. I learned to smother my joy, to bury the fire inside me so he wouldn't see it burning. If he suspected I was planning something, I knew he would do everything in his power to stop me. At night, I lay awake rehearsing my escape. I imagined walking out of the house with my bags packed, stepping into a future where my throat wasn't sore from his grip and my heart wasn't heavy from my mother's betrayal. I imagined freedom so vividly that it almost felt real. But when the morning came, the walls of that house reminded me that I was still trapped, at least for now. My mother noticed the letter too. She didn't congratulate me, didn't smile or show pride. Instead, she sighed and said I was probably wasting my time. She warned me that people like us didn't get opportunities like that I was setting myself up for disappointment. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let them root inside me this time. For once, I didn't internalize her doubts. Instead, I folded the letter back into its envelope and held it like a secret weapon. She didn't have to believe in me. I would believe in myself. Meanwhile, his temper seemed to worsen. The more independent I became, the more he tried to pull me back into submission. If I stayed late at school, he accused me of sneaking around. If I spent too much time in my room, he barged in, demanding to know what I was hiding. Every move I made was under a microscope. And still, I kept working, saving money, filling out more applications, preparing for the day I would finally walk away. One evening, after another one of his explosive rages, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling. My body ached, my throat sore from shouting back when I knew I shouldn't have. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. And I thought, what if I don't make it out? What if one day, he doesn't let go when his hands are around my neck? That thought terrified me, but it also steeled my resolve. I didn't want my story to end inside those walls. So I doubled down. I worked harder at school, earning grades that even he couldn't dismiss. I kept saving every spare dollar. I kept my eyes forward, locked on the finish line. But leaving wasn't just about money and opportunity, it was about courage. And courage didn't come easily to me. The voices in my head, his voice, my mother's voice, whispered constantly that I wasn't enough, that I was provoking, exaggerating, lying. Sometimes I caught myself believing them, and that was the scariest part. It wasn't just their hands around my throat anymore, it was their words, living inside me, trying to choke me from the inside out. Breaking free meant more than leaving the house. It meant unlearning everything they had drilled into me. It meant deciding, over and over again, that I deserved better. Some days I could do it. Some days I couldn't. But every time I tucked away $1, every time I filled out an application, every time I imagined a future beyond them, I was reminding myself that I had a choice. There were setbacks, of course. One day, he found the babysitting money I had hidden in a sock drawer. He stormed into my room, waving the bills in my face, demanding to know who I was giving it to. He accused me of hiding it for a boyfriend, of betraying the family. I tried to explain, but he didn't want explanations. He shoved me hard against the dresser, his words spitting out like venom. My mother appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, silent. When he was done, he tossed the crumpled bills on the floor and left me shaking. My mother muttered that I shouldn't keep secrets if I didn't want trouble. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, clutching those wrinkled bills. But even through the tears, I promised myself I wouldn't give up. If he wanted to crush me, he would have to fight harder. I wasn't going to stop saving. I wasn't going to stop planning. Every bruise, every insult, every dismissal from my mother only added fuel to the fire that was pushing me toward freedom. And then came the breaking point. It was late, and I was in the kitchen finishing an assignment when he stumbled in, smelling of alcohol. He asked me for money, said he needed it for something important. I told him I didn't have any left, that I had used it for school supplies. He didn't believe me. His face twisted, and before I could move, his hands were around my throat again. The world narrowed to his grip, my lungs burning, my vision tunneling. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My hands clawed at him, desperate for air. When he finally let go, I collapsed, coughing, gasping, tears streaming down my face. My mother rushed in, but not to comfort me. She turned on me, saying I had provoked him, saying I should have just given him what he wanted. Her voice was sharp, cruel, echoing in my ears even louder than the pounding of my heart. That was the moment I knew, if I stayed, I wouldn't survive. It wasn't a matter of if anymore. It was a matter of when. And survival became my only goal. I started reaching out quietly, cautiously, to teachers and mentors I trusted. I didn't tell them everything, but I hinted enough that they understood I needed help. I asked about financial aid, housing options, anything that could make leaving easier. To my relief, some of them offered guidance, encouragement, and resources. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this fight. Still, I couldn't move too quickly. Every step had to be hidden, every plan concealed. Living in that house meant walking on eggshells, always pretending, always lying just enough to keep the peace. But underneath, I was building something stronger than fear. I was building a way out. And even though the future terrified me, it also pulled me forward like a light in the dark. I didn't know what awaited me outside those walls. I didn't know if I would stumble, fall, or fail. But I knew one thing: staying was no longer an option. So I held on, one day at a time, my escape inching closer. And with each day, I told myself the same thing: soon. Soon, I would be free. Soon. That word became my mantra. I whispered it to myself while brushing my teeth, while walking to school, while lying awake at night listening to the creaks of the old house. Soon, I told myself. Not forever. Not always. Soon. But the closer I got to leaving, the more dangerous things became. He could feel me slipping away, even if he didn't know the details. Abusers have a way of sensing when their control is weakening, and his anger flared more often, sharper, unpredictable. Every day felt like a test, a performance where the stakes were life or death. I started packing in secret. Not big things, just small items that wouldn't be noticed. A few clothes rolled tightly and hidden in the bottom of my school bag. A notebook with my most important papers. Little tokens of comfort, like a photo of me as a child before everything went wrong. Each item tucked away was a silent rebellion, proof that I was preparing for a life beyond that house. One night, while my mother was doing laundry, I slipped into her room and quietly searched through the drawers. I wasn't looking for money. I had stopped hoping she'd ever help me in that way. I was looking for my birth certificate, my social security card, anything I might need once I was on my own. My hands shook as I sifted through papers, the sound of the washer rumbling downstairs barely covering my racing heart. I found what I needed, slid them into my notebook, and placed everything back exactly as it was. That night, I slept with those papers under my pillow, like they were a shield against the chaos that still surrounded me. My mother grew suspicious. She would ask where I was going, why I was spending so much time at school. Sometimes her eyes softened, like she wanted to ask more, like a part of her knew what was happening. But then she would pull back, shake her head, and mutter that I was acting dramatic again. Her denial was her comfort zone, and I had long since stopped hoping she'd step out of it. Then came the day everything almost unraveled. He had been drinking, angry about money as usual. He stormed into my room and started tearing through drawers, yanking clothes out, tossing notebooks onto the floor. My heart pounded as I watched him getting closer to where I had hidden some of my savings. I prayed silently that he wouldn't find it, that luck would be on my side. And somehow, it was. He didn't see the envelope taped under the bottom drawer. Instead, he found one of my college brochures and waved it in my face. His words were slurred, mocking, filled with venom. He told me I was wasting my time, that people like me didn't get out, that I'd come crawling back when I failed. He crumpled the brochure and threw it at me before stumbling out. I picked up the wrinkled paper, smoothed it out, and pressed it flat on my desk. His words hurt, but they didn't kill my dream. If anything, they lit a fire inside me. I would prove him wrong. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. I finalized financial aid forms with the help of a school counselor who quietly guided me through the process. I arranged for a friend to hold onto a small bag of essentials, just in case. I memorized bus schedules, wrote down emergency contacts, and mapped out every possible escape route. It felt like planning a heist, except instead of stealing money or jewels, I was stealing back my life. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, with full financial aid, I felt my knees buckle under the weight of relief. I held the paper to my chest, tears streaming down my face, knowing this was it. My way out wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. But real didn't mean easy. Leaving meant facing the possibility of being hunted down, of being dragged back. It meant enduring my mother's icy silence or sharp accusations. It meant stepping into an unknown world with little more than determination and hope. The night before I left, I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of the house, the groan of the pipes, the tick of the clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Every sound etched itself into my memory. This was the place that had shaped me, broken me, scarred me. And tomorrow, I would walk away. Morning came like a blur. I moved quietly, deliberately, packing the last of my things into my school bag. I slipped the envelope of savings from under the drawer, tucked it deep into my pocket, and clutched my notebook with the important papers. My hands trembled as I tied my shoes, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline. When I walked out the front door, the air felt different. Lighter. Sharper. Every step down the walkway felt like I was shedding chains I had worn for years. I didn't look back, not once. The bus ride was long, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, my heart pounding with equal parts terror and exhilaration. For the first time in years, I was in control of my own body, my own choices, my own future. But freedom wasn't a straight line. It was messy, complicated, and often terrifying. There were nights when I doubted myself, when the voices of my mother and him echoed in my head, telling me I was weak, that I wouldn't make it. There were days when money was tight, when I skipped meals to stretch my savings, when loneliness clawed at me in the silence of an unfamiliar dorm room. Still, I reminded myself that hardship outside was nothing compared to the prison I had left behind. Even on the hardest days, I could breathe without fear of hands around my throat. Even when I stumbled forward, away from the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I built new routines. I found small joys, coffee with classmates, late-night study sessions, quiet mornings in the library where no one shouted at me, no one blamed me, no one told me I was provoking anyone. Slowly, I began to trust the world outside those walls. Slowly, I began to trust myself. My mother called sometimes, though her voice was laced with bitterness. She asked why I had left, accused me of abandoning her. She never once asked if I was okay, never once admitted what had happened, never once offered an apology. Each call was a reminder that her denial was her shield, her choice. And though it hurt, I learned to let that pain wash over me instead of drowning me. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need his control anymore. What I needed was me, the version of me who had survived every choking hand, every cruel word, every betrayal. The version of me who had whispered soon until soon finally became now. And with every passing day, I grew stronger. The first weeks after leaving felt unreal, like I was living in someone else's body. I would wake up in the dorm, sunlight streaming through the blinds, and for a split second I expected to hear his heavy footsteps pounding down the hall, or my mother's voice calling me dramatic. But the footsteps never came. The accusations never came. Instead, I lay there listening to silence, the kind of silence that didn't hurt, the kind that wrapped around me like safety. Still, freedom carried its own shadows. Without the constant chaos of that house, I was forced to confront what had been done to me. For years I had been in survival mode, focused only on the next move, the next breath. Now, without hands around my throat or insults hurled across the room, I began to feel the weight of everything I had endured. The bruises faded, but the memories remained, sharp and raw. I found myself flinching when someone raised their hand too quickly, even if they were just reaching for a pen. I startled at loud noises, my heart racing before I could even think. I kept checking the locks on the door, not because I didn't trust the building, but because a part of me couldn't shake the fear that he might come looking for me. Rationally, I knew he probably wouldn't, but trauma doesn't deal in logic. Classes became both my distraction and my anchor. I threw myself into the work, reading, writing, studying until my eyes blurred. Every assignment I turned in felt like a victory, proof that I wasn't who he said I was. I wasn't weak. I wasn't worthless. I was capable of building something better. But when the nights were quiet and the room too still, the memories returned. I replayed the times he choked me, the times my mother stood by and called me a liar, an attention seeker, a provocateur. I questioned myself endlessly. Had I really done something to deserve it? Had I provoked him without realizing? Was my mother right? The internal battle was exhausting, but I was slowly learning to answer those questions with a firm no. I started journaling, pouring every memory, every thought onto paper. Some nights I wrote until my hand cramped, tears blurring the words. Writing became my therapy, a way to release what I had been forced to carry in silence for so long. On those pages, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to minimize my pain. I could admit that it hurt, that it had broken me in ways I was still uncovering. Eventually, I found the courage to visit the campus counseling center. Sitting in that office, my hands twisting in my lap, I expected the counselor to dismiss me the way my mother had. I expected her to tell me I was being dramatic. But she didn't. She listened. She believed me. And when she said I had survived abuse, I felt something inside me crack open. For the first time, I heard someone call it what it was. Healing didn't happen all at once. It was slow, uneven, messy. Some days I felt strong, proud of how far I'd come. Other days I collapsed under the weight of memories, convinced I'd never really be free. But through it all, I kept going. I had already survived the worst, surely I could survive the healing too. There were moments of unexpected joy, too. The first time I laughed with friends over something silly and realized I wasn't faking it. The first time I stayed up late watching a movie and didn't have to worry about being yelled at. The first time I walked outside at night and felt the cool air on my face without fear of what waited at home. These small moments reminded me that life could be more than pain. Life could be gentle, even beautiful. My mother remained a shadow in my life. She called sometimes, her tone sharp, filled with guilt trips and accusations. She told me I was ungrateful, that I had abandoned her, that I had made everything up. At first, her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought were healing. But over time, I began to hear them differently. Her denial wasn't about me, it was about her. Admitting the truth would mean admitting she had failed to protect me, that she had chosen him over her child. And she wasn't ready to face that. I grieved the mother I wished I had, the one who might have held me after he hurt me, the one who might have believed my cries for help. That mother didn't exist, and grieving her was part of my healing. I couldn't change who she was. I could only choose how much power her words had over me now. One afternoon, sitting in a quiet corner of the library, I wrote myself a letter. I wrote to the younger me, the one who had cried silently in bed, the one who had begged for help only to be silenced. I told her I believed her. I told her none of it was her fault. I told her she was strong for surviving, brave for holding on, and worthy of love. As I finished the letter, tears rolled down my cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of release. Bit by bit, I was building a new life. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was mine. And for the first time, that was enough. The turning point for me came on a quiet morning, months after I had left. I was walking across campus, books in my arms, when I passed a family gathered under the trees. A little girl ran up to her mother, who bent down, scooped her into her arms, and kissed her forehead. The scene was ordinary, nothing remarkable, but it stopped me in my tracks. For a moment, I felt grief slam into me, the kind that steals your breath. I thought of all the times I had run to my mother, desperate for that same kind of love, and been met with indifference or blame. But then, something shifted. Watching that mother and child, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. I deserved that kind of love. Not the twisted version my stepfather offered, not the conditional affection my mother withheld. Real love. Safe love. Gentle love. And if I hadn't received it then, that didn't mean I never would. That realization lit a fire inside me. For so long, I had defined myself by what they had done to me, by the pain they had inflicted. But in that moment, I understood that my story didn't end with their cruelty. My story was mine to write, and I could choose to write it differently. So I kept walking that morning, but I walked taller. The calls from my mother eventually stopped. The silence should have hurt, but instead, it brought peace. I no longer waited for her to believe me, to protect me, to finally choose me. I had chosen myself, and that was enough. With each passing day, I grew stronger. The flashbacks came less often. The fear loosened its grip. I laughed more, I slept better, I dared to dream about a future that wasn't defined by survival but by joy. And though the scars remain, both on my body and in my heart, I've come to see them differently now. They are not reminders of weakness. They are proof of survival. Proof that I endured what should have broken me and still found a way to rise. Looking back, I don't pretend it was easy. I don't sugarcoat what happened. He hurt me. She betrayed me. They tried to silence me. But I refused to stay silent any longer. I cried for help after years of silence. And while my mother may have called me an attention seeker, I know the truth now. I wasn't seeking attention. I was seeking freedom. I was seeking life. And I found it. Today, I stand not as a victim of their choices, but as the author of my own story. A story of resilience, of healing, of reclaiming my voice. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from my journey, it's this: you are not what was done to you. You are not the lies they told about you. You are not too broken to heal. You are worthy. You are strong. And your story is far from over.